Most people believe that when a conflict reaches their state, survival comes down to luck. That whoever prepared the most expensive kit wins. That the people who make it through the first 72 hours had something you didn't. That belief is going to cost lives, and tonight I'm going to prove it wrong. There are 7 items the US military purchases in bulk, not because they're tactical, not because they're expensive, but because they work in every situation, every time, no matter what. And the last one, I've been saving it for the end. It's something the military has quietly stocked since World War I. It does 5 completely different jobs, and one of them involves fire, without a match. You'll know exactly what it is before this video ends. You are sitting at the first item right now. You don't have it. Let's fix that. It's the middle of the night, and a boil water advisory just went out across your county. Not a hypothetical advisory, a real one, because whatever is upstream from the municipal water supply just became a problem. The tap is still running, but running tap water and safe tap water are 2 very different things. Your case of bottled water in the garage. You shared that down to nothing over the first 12 hours. Your household has 3 people, and each person needs at least 2 liters of water per day just to stay functional. The creek behind the neighborhood is right there. You can hear it from your back fence, but you don't know what's upstream. You don't know what chemicals, what waste, what pathogens, meaning the microscopic organisms that make you violently sick, went into that water in the last 48 hours. You drink it without treating it, and you're gambling with your digestive system at the exact moment your body cannot afford to be down. Water purification tablets are small white pills about the size of an aspirin, and they solve this problem completely. You drop 1 tablet into 1 liter of untreated water from any source, a creek, a puddle, a swimming pool. Wait 30 minutes, and that water is safe to drink. They work by releasing chlorine dioxide into the water, which is a chemical compound that kills bacteria, viruses, and parasites the same way industrial bleach sanitizes a surface. Except these are formulated specifically for drinking water and completely safe for your body at the correct dose. Think of it as a reset button for whatever's living in that water. 1 bottle of 50 tablets costs less than a fast food value meal and treats 50 liters of water. FEMA's official emergency preparedness guide at ready.gov identifies safe drinking water as the single highest priority resource in any domestic emergency. The U.S. Army Field Manual FM 3.05.70, the military's official survival handbook used in field training, lists chemical water purification as the primary water safety protocol whenever boiling is not possible. The military buys these tablets in bulk, not because they're a last resort, but because they're the most reliable and most portable water solution that exists. Water tablets handle what's already in the water, but they can't help you if you can't carry that water anywhere. And in a real emergency, that's a gap almost nobody closes until it's too late. That's the next item. Your shelter tarp is flapping loose in the wind. The rain has been going for 4 hours, and everything underneath it is wet, including the gear you needed to stay dry. The rope you brought is a bungee cord from the trunk of your car, and it snapped on the second anchor point. Someone in your group has a swollen ankle from the move out of the house yesterday, and they need it stabilized. You have shoelaces and a phone charger cable, and neither one of those is going to hold anything. 100 feet of paracord, also called 550 cord, because each strand holds 550 pounds of weight before breaking, costs less than the tip you leave at a diner, and solves every one of those problems simultaneously. But the reason the military has used it since World War II isn't just the outer cord, it's what's inside. Paracord has 7 inner strands woven inside the outer sheath, and you can pull those strands out individually for jobs that need something thinner. A fishing line? Thread to close a wound? A tripwire to detect movement around your campsite at night? It's a cable that contains 6 more cables. The whole cord weighs nothing and takes up no space. The U.S. Army's CRE program, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, and is the training program that teaches soldiers how to stay alive behind enemy lines with almost nothing, identifies paracord as one of 5 non-negotiable items every soldier carries, regardless of mission type, environment, or duration. Look at the first 2 items on this list. No brand name, no battery required, no Wi-Fi signal, no cellular network, no app. That's not a coincidence. Every item on this list was chosen by people whose lives depended on it working when every single system around them had already failed. That filter only gets sharper from here. The power has been out for 18 hours. You find a gas station with a generator still running. The owner is pumping fuel manually, and there's a line of 12 cars. You get to the front. You pull out your card. He shakes his head. Card readers are down. ATMs are dark. Every digital transaction in a 2-mile radius is dead. The man behind you in line hands over 2 20s and drives away with a full tank. You have $80 in your checking account and 0 of it in your hands. You sit in that line for 45 minutes and leave with nothing. $300 in small bills, nothing larger than a 20, sealed in a waterproof bag in your go bag or your glove compartment, is the only financial tool that works when every digital system has failed. Small bills specifically, not large ones, because in a crisis, nobody has change. A $50 bill is nearly worthless if nobody can break it. 20s, 10s, and 5s are universally liquid, meaning anyone will accept them without hesitation because there's nothing to negotiate. FEMA's ready. Gov Emergency Checklist specifically lists small denomination cash as a core supply item in any extended infrastructure disruption. The Department of Homeland Security's National Preparedness Guidelines identify loss of financial system access as one of the 5 most common secondary effects of any large-scale emergency event. Not an edge case, a standard outcome. 3 items down. And not one of them is the item I mentioned in the first 60 seconds. The one the military has stocked since World War I. The one that does 5 completely different jobs. Here's one more thing you know about it. You've probably owned it at some point. You might have thrown it out. Keep going. It is the second day. Your phone is at 8%. You've been rationing the battery since yesterday morning, turning it off between uses, keeping it on airplane mode to slow the drain. The local news app needs a cell signal you haven't had since last night. Your neighbor says he heard something about which evacuation routes are still open, but he got it secondhand, and he's not sure if it applies to your zone. You don't know if the emergency is getting worse or stabilizing. You don't know if you should stay or move. You're making every decision with zero information. And in any emergency situation, zero information is more dangerous than almost anything else. A hand crank emergency radio, one you power by turning a handle for 60 seconds to get 30 minutes of broadcast, gives you direct access to NOAA weather radio and the emergency alert system. NOAA stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and they operate a network of radio transmitters across the United States that broadcast emergency alerts around the clock on a dedicated frequency that operates completely independently from the internet, from cellular networks, and from commercial power. When every other broadcast channel is dark, those transmitters are still running. The hand crank radio is the receiver. It's like having a direct, hardwired connection to the government's emergency broadcast backbone that requires no charger, no data plan, and no signal. FEMA's official household emergency kit list at ready.gov includes a battery-powered or hand-crank NOAA weather radio as a required item. The Federal Communications Commission's Emergency Alert System Guidelines confirm that NOAA radio is the designated primary backup communication channel for civilian use during federal, state, and local emergencies. One more thing before you move forward. Most people who have a hand-crank radio don't know the frequencies. Write this down before you move on. NOAA broadcasts on 7 standard frequencies. The primary channel, covering most of the continental United States, is 162 on 400 per hertz. That is the one you tune to first. In an emergency, the 30-second gap of scanning the dial instead of knowing the number could mean missing an evacuation order. That's the difference between a tool and a plan. Still haven't told you what the last item is. But here's one more clue. It was issued to soldiers in both world wars. One of its 5 jobs, a job that has nothing to do with medicine, nothing to do with water, and nothing to do with communication, directly solves a problem you would face on night 1 of any emergency. The answer is getting closer. It is 2 a.m. Someone in your group caught broken glass when a window came in during the storm, or caught debris during the move, or slipped on rubble. The cause doesn't matter. There is a wound on their forearm that is not stopping. You have a basic first aid kit, the kind from the drugstore with Band-Aids and antiseptic wipes. The bandages are soaking through in under 2 minutes. The nearest working hospital is 40 miles away, and you do not know if those roads are passable. You are watching the clock, and you are out of options. A real trauma kit, different from a first aid kit in the same way a fire extinguisher is different from a garden hose, contains 3 specific items. A tourniquet, which cuts off blood flow to an entire limb in under 7 seconds by functioning like a clamp on a hose, stopping the bleeding at its source. A pressure bandage, which compresses a wound too large or too centrally located for a tourniquet. And hemostatic gauze, a special clotting fabric that causes blood to solidify on contact by releasing minerals that accelerate the blood's natural clotting process, like pouring a catalyst into a chemical reaction that isn't moving fast enough on its own. All 3 together cost less than a large pizza with delivery. The American College of Surgeons. Stop the Bleed campaign, a national trauma training program developed directly in response to mass casualty events, identifies uncontrolled hemorrhage as the single most preventable cause of death in any trauma situation where professional medical care is delayed. The U.S. Army's Combat Application Tourniquet, known as the CAT tourniquet, has been standard issue for every deployed American soldier since 2005 and is documented to have reduced extremity hemorrhage deaths in combat by more than 60%. This is not gear for extreme preppers. This is the gap between alive and not, and it costs less than dinner. Here's where most people, even people who have been prepping for years, will make a mistake that costs them. They own every item above this one. They have never thought about what happens when the temperature drops, That's item 6. It is 3 in the morning on day 2, and it is 40 degrees outside and dropping toward 35. Your heat is off, no power, no gas. You layered every piece of clothing you own hours ago. Your sleeping bag is rated to 50 degrees, which is 10 degrees too warm for tonight. Your body is generating heat, but the blankets and clothing around you are letting it escape into the cold air at a faster rate than your body can replace it. Hypothermia, which is when your core body temperature drops low enough to interfere with organ function, starting with judgment, then coordination, then consciousness, sets in much faster in a stressed, sleep-deprived body than it does in a healthy, rested one. The threshold is closer than you think. A Mylar emergency blanket, the thin, silver, crinkly sheet that looks like it came off a satellite, reflects up to 90% of your own body heat back at you, and it does it passively, with no power source required. Mylar is the same reflective material used in spacecraft insulation, and it works by acting as a mirror for infrared radiation, which is just the scientific term for body heat. Normally, that heat radiates outward and disappears into the air around you, the same way a light bulb warms a room. Mylar bounces it back the same way a thermos keeps coffee hot. A single Mylar blanket costs less than a birthday balloon at the dollar store. A 4-pack costs less than a coffee and a muffin. The U.S. Army Field Manual FM 4-25.11, the military's first aid field manual, lists emergency thermal protection as a required countermeasure against hypothermia in any field situation where standard shelter is unavailable. The World Health Organization's guidelines on trauma management place hypothermia prevention as the third most critical intervention in any prolonged emergency scenario, after airway management and bleeding control. A Mylar blanket keeps your heat in, but it can't produce heat you've already lost. And on night 2, when the adrenaline has worn off and the temperature has kept dropping, that is the exact problem almost no one has pre-solved. That's where the last item comes in. Every item on this list has been pointing toward this one, you just didn't know it yet. Here's everything you already know about it. It has been issued to soldiers in bulk since World War I. It does 5 completely different jobs, not just one. One of those jobs involves fire, without a match. Another job has nothing to do with fire at all, and it directly addresses something that ends missions not with enemy fire, but with something slower, smaller, and entirely preventable. It weighs almost nothing. It fits in the palm of your hand. It costs less than a candy bar. You are 1 sentence away from knowing exactly what it is. Here is where that sentence starts. You have been moving on foot for 2 days. Your feet are wet from crossing a flooded street yesterday morning, and the skin on both heels has been rubbing against the inside of your boots since before noon. There's a blister on your right heel the size of a quarter, and a raw patch forming on your left that hasn't broken open yet. You still have distance to cover. In a normal week, that blister is 3 days of discomfort. In this scenario, it is a mission stopper. Military historians have documented that throughout both world wars, more soldiers were pulled out of operations from infected feet, skin breakdown, and untreated friction wounds than from any single weapon system. The body breaks down from the outside in, and the outside is exactly where this item does its first job. The item is petroleum jelly. You know it as Vaseline. A 13-ounce jar costs less than a fast food combo meal and lasts for months of daily use. Here are its 5 jobs. Every one of them matters, and you need to understand all 5. The first job is friction prevention, applied to the feet before any long movement. Before you lace your boots and start walking, petroleum jelly reduces the friction between skin and boot that causes blisters, not after the blister forms, before. The U.S. Army has recommended petroleum jelly for blister prevention since World War I, when foot injuries were among the leading causes of non-combat operational casualties in the European theater. Think of it as a lubricant, the same way you'd oil a hinge to stop it from grinding. You're putting a layer between 2 surfaces that shouldn't be rubbing directly against each other. The second job is fire starting. Take a cotton ball, a small piece of cotton fabric torn from any piece of clothing, and coat it completely in petroleum jelly. That cotton ball will hold a flame for up to 4 minutes in wind and light rain. It acts as a slow burn wick, the same way the cotton thread in a candle draws up melted wax to keep the flame alive, even when you stop applying direct heat. In wet conditions, where paper, dry leaves, and tinder won't catch, a petroleum jelly cotton ball is one of the most reliable fire-starting materials available to any civilian in any environment. You only need any spark source, a flint striker, a lighter that's running low on fluid, even 2 rocks struck together at the right angle. The third job is wound sealing. Petroleum jelly creates an airtight barrier, meaning a barrier that blocks oxygen from reaching the wound surface, over small cuts, abrasions, and raw skin. Bacteria that cause wound infections need oxygen to multiply rapidly. The barrier slows that process down significantly, keeping minor wounds from becoming serious infections in the field when proper wound care isn't accessible. It is not a replacement for cleaning a wound with antiseptic. But when you are 3 days in and proper wound care is not available, a petroleum jelly seal is the difference between a manageable cut and a wound that sidelines you. The fourth job is cold weather skin protection. When the temperature drops and wind is present, exposed skin, especially lips, the inside of the nostrils and the ears, begins to crack and split. Those cracks are open wounds. In cold, dry, or high wind environments, cracked lips and skin are not just uncomfortable. They are entry points for infection. They bleed with every facial movement. They make eating and drinking painful. And they degrade your ability to stay focused on the decisions that matter. A thin coat of petroleum jelly applied to exposed skin seals the surface and blocks the moisture loss that causes cracking, the same way a coat of wax protects a wooden surface from drying out in winter. The fifth job is rust prevention on metal tools. A thin coat of petroleum jelly applied to any metal surface, a knife blade, a multi-tool, a firearm, prevents oxidation, which is the chemical process where metal reacts with oxygen and moisture to form rust. Think of it as a plastic wrap for metal that blocks the two things metal reacts with, air and water. In a humid or wet environment, unprotected metal can begin to rust within 24 hours. A tool that doesn't work because the blade is seized or the mechanism is corroded is dead weight. Dead weight at the wrong moment is a real problem. The U.S. Army Field Manual FM 305.70 explicitly lists petroleum jelly among recommended multi-use survival materials for field situations. The SEER program, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, includes petroleum jelly fire starting as a core fire-building technique in its field training curriculum. FEMA's community preparedness materials list petroleum jelly as a recommended multi-use first aid and survival supply for household emergency kits. Your grandparents kept a jar of this under the bathroom sink and used it for everything without ever writing it down in a checklist. It was just the thing you reached for. Somewhere along the way, we traded the things that actually work for things that come in tactical packaging with a brand name on them and a $60 price tag. The prepping industry cannot charge you $60 for a jar of petroleum jelly. So they pretend it doesn't exist. They show you gear that photographs well. But the people who actually navigate extended emergencies, the soldiers, the search and rescue teams, the disaster response professionals who have operated in the field for weeks at a time, every single one of them has this in their kit. It is not interesting enough to feature in a gear photo. It is interesting enough to keep people alive. That is the item. That is what everything has been building toward. Now you have all 7. Water purification tablets for the water you can't trust. Paracord for everything that needs to be held, lashed, pulled, or repaired. Cash and small bills for the moment every digital system goes dark. A hand crank radio tune to 162.400 for the information that keeps you making decisions instead of guessing. A trauma kit for the bleeding that won't wait for anyone to arrive. Mylar blankets for the heat your body needs to keep generating. And petroleum jelly, the item the U.S. military has carried in bulk for over 100 years. For 5 jobs that no other single item can do as cheaply, as simply, or as reliably. That is the protocol. 7 items. Every one of them costs less than a meal out. Every one of them works without a signal, a charger, or a functioning grid. None of them require a special skill level, a military background, or a storage unit full of gear. The people who get through the first 72 hours of any emergency are not the luckiest people in the room. They are the people who made a decision before the decision was urgent, before the gas station line formed, before the shelves went bare, before the tap ran dry. You just made that decision. Most people watching this won't act on it before tomorrow. You now know exactly what to get and exactly why each one matters. If this changed how you think about the first hour, share it with someone who needs to see it. The algorithm only puts this in front of the people who need it when you help it move. If you want the complete 72-hour kit, everything staged, sourced, and ready to go before tonight. That video is already on this channel. Stay ready.